Nurgle is the grossest thing in Warhammer 40K. Beyond disgusting. Yet, he has his following, both in-universe and in the community. He's one of the big four Chaos gods, but he stands out in his own extreme way by being gross and infectious beyond comprehension. Now, Games Workshop likes to sell this image of Nurgle as the happiest and smiliest of the Chaos gods. Sure, he's an evil malignant tumor on existence and means to send the universe into entropic decay and stagnation, but he loves you if you're one of his followers. If you're one of those who cast aside all reason and joined up with him, selling your soul to the Lord of Plagues and corruption. But this image isn't exactly based on complete truth. It's Nurgle's propaganda. Sure, he makes his followers much more resilient, much more impervious, and practically immortal. But there's a price that the Plague Marines pay, and the mortal followers too. You get stuck in a decaying body full of the worst infections and mutations possible. Without the grace of the Plague Lord, without his direct attention keeping you sustained through his gifts, you will be cast into an agony that is not even imaginable. You will want to die 1,000 times over, yet be unable to expire. And this can happen if you fall out of favor with the Plague God, or if you simply get outside of his influence. Perhaps an Imperial Saint intervenes, or perhaps Gilliman shows up and is channeling the power of his father. It can leave you stuck out in the cold, with your guts on the outside and your own mutations trying to devour you, as you try to peel off your own face to get the suffering of 1,000 world's worst pandemics coursing through your veins to stop. But it won't stop. It never will. Not until you accept his gifts and relinquish yourself to your fate. Nurgle will make you a deal, and it will be one that you can't refuse, just like he made Mortarion. Sure, it may have saved the Death Guard an eternity of suffering unimaginably, but there's more to it than that. Nurgle owns them now. It isn't even that he took their suffering away. He actually just made it so they don't notice it. They don't feel the degradation and decay that they have become. And this is the worst fate of all. I'm sorry to any Tzeentch cultists out there who might be offended, but Nurgle is rotting you, devouring you, slowly, for all time. You just don't feel it anymore. His blessing is the ultimate curse. His gifts are lies. Nurgle is a local anesthetic that makes the Plague Marines and others like them numb to the atrocities that are coursing through them, running rampant and metastasizing. Your soul will not be in agony. It will be in bliss. It will be in joy. It will be so happy to be spreading the love of the Plague Father. But Nurgle's followers all have that indoctrinated, brainwashed look on their faces. Sure, they're smiling ear to ear, but it is a fanatical smile, a delusional smile, something based in denial and suffering and the need to never feel that suffering again. If you keep smiling and you keep liking it, even though the Plague God has turned you into a half-man, half-tentacled monstrosity that is somehow partially composed of feces and sewage, Nurgle will keep you numb to the condition you would have never signed up for in the first place if you weren't manipulated into it by being thrust into the worst possible agony imaginable. And for Nurgle's chosen mortal champion, Mortarion, and the Death Guard, it was so much worse than even that, as they were lost in the warp. Typhon, who was secretly serving Nurgle already, killed all the navigators and they got stuck in the warp, cast adrift on the Sea of Souls, directionless and without any hope of finding their way. Then Nurgle racked the fleet with such corruption that even the vessels, the ships themselves, were weeping pus from bleeding wounds. The Marines were so corrupted and contorted that they wanted it to end after the first second, which felt like eons, like a miniature eternity. And all Mortarion had to do to set his sons and his self free from that agony was to sell his soul, and that of his sons as well, to Nurgle and serve the Plague God eternally. For Mortarion, Primarch of the 14th Legion, son of the Emperor of Mankind, to take on the role Nurgle had chosen for him since his birth, to become Nurgle's champion, his greatest mortal follower, and basically overall general of the Plague Father's forces. An offer that he couldn't refuse. To do so was to suffer endlessly, more than any beings had probably ever suffered in their lives. For Nurgle cursed Mortarion's fleet with both the Destroyer Plague and Nurgle's Rot, two of the most virulent, awful diseases ever created. In the end, Nurgle had his champion. He had one of the Space Marine legions, the Dusk Raiders, the Death Guard, in the palm of his hand. His manipulation and diabolical scheming to get what he wanted shows that Nurgle is pure evil. The whole thing was pitched as a choice to be made. Oh hey Morty, do you want this endless unimaginable suffering to end? Oh you do, huh? Well, I can make that happen. Now if Nurgle had put their guts back inside them, had wiped away all the filth and feces the Plague Marines were basically made up of at that point, and had cleaned them up a bit, it would have been one thing. Still an absolutely janky level of manipulation, but not as bad as what happened. I mean, Nurgle did not heal them. He only ended the suffering, not the effects of the diseases, not the contagion that poured out of them. He created sewage marines who were shrouded in a cloud of stench, rot, and flies that would choke even Astartes. Only Horus, Abaddon, and a few others seemed unconcerned and able to stand in the same room as the Death Guard. Nurgle had been corrupting Mortarion his whole life, slowly. Everything that happened on Barbarous, everything that the Pale King went through as a child and a young man, was orchestrated by the Plague Lord in order to achieve the end result he got. A champion, a pus-filled hero for chaos. If that kind of manipulation is not evil, I don't know what is. I mean, it should have powered Tzeentch just based on how sinister and manipulative it was. Lies, manipulation, deals with the devil that are made when no possible real choice is to be had. This is Nurgle. He may just be the grossest, sickest, most disgusting thing in the Warhammer 40K setting, but he's also among the most manipulative, sinister, and evil. Absolutely diabolical. It may be that Nurgle's level of evil rivals any of the other Chaos Gods. He's easily as cruel as Slaanesh, despite the happy smiley image, as focused as Khorne when he wants to be, and it's doubtful that he's as manipulative as Tzeentch, but I don't know. When I look at Mortarion and the Death Guard's fall, I have a hard time coming up with anything that awful that Tzeentch did. Okay, well, maybe I'm not. Tzeentch is undeniably evil and manipulative, but who would have thought that of Nurgle on that level? So, in Grandfather Nurgle, we have a being that is easily a contender for most evil thing in the universe. Yet he spins his image as if he's some super loving, caring nurturer that just wants to grow his garden, a manifestation of one of the most basic aspects of nature and the physical universe, decay. He's the god whose propaganda suggests that death and decay, that entropy, are all just parts of the natural order of things and not to be feared. They're not evil or bad, they're just part of the cycle of life. And while he does have a point, that is all a facade. For what is underneath is beyond horrific, beyond anything humanity could ultimately deal with. But it's not just Mortarion and his Death Guard that fell to Nurgle's corruption. Remember, Horus Lupercal was felled with a poop knife wielded by a Nurgle-possessed maniac. It was Nurgle who got to the War Master. Nurgle who was able to corrupt him ultimately. Now the other gods wanted in on the prize for sure, as we saw them all offer him boons, and ultimately made him feel as if he were going to become one of their equals, one of their peers. They dangled the Dark King mantle in front of him, though it was not theirs to offer. But it was Nurgle who got Chaos's foot in Horus's door, so to speak. Horus's visions, his delusions more like, were what drove him to set the galaxy on fire. And while Erebus had a strong hand in it, he couldn't have done it alone. It was the influence of the Plague God that laid Horus low, that had him on the verge of death, to the point where his sons, desperate to save him, forsook their own beliefs and took him to the Serpent Lodge to be healed. Now I think that Nurgle may have had Horus in his sights and wanted the War Master to himself, but it just didn't work out that way for him. There is, after all, the Great Game, and who is better prepared for such a game, such a rivalry, than the Lord of Stagnation and Rot? The whole nice guy image, that caring, nurturing father image, the smiling Nurglings and laughing great unclean ones image, it's all a ruse to sow confusion and discord among his enemies, which is actually all life. To put on an air of nicety, disarming his foes, or at least making them less worried than they should be. Look at the smiles on the faces of some of the Nurgle models over the years, and you'll see what I mean. The Plague God's putting on a total front. Sure, we can see the pus and the boils, the oozing putrescence and pestilential miasma that surrounds him, his demons, and his followers. But it is the smile, the laughter, the jovial attitude. That is the most disgusting thing about Nurgle. He's physically gross and will corrupt your body and soul, but he's also fake. A manipulator whose sorcery is so foul that it gives everyone who succumbs to it Stockholm Syndrome. Once Nurgle's corruption sets into you, you're consumed by it, overwhelmingly. Your mindset becomes so twisted that you perceive the many severe curses and plagues heaped upon you as gifts. So the followers of the Plague God would argue, how is such extreme resilience not a gift? Especially for warriors like the Adeptus Astartes. How is imperviousness to all disease and decay not a gift? How is immortality, being reborn again in the warp when one falls, not a gift? To that, my counter-argument would be, hey bro, your guts are on the outside. The giant toothy maw that was once your stomach just took a bite out of the tentacle growing out of your armpit. You smell like the worst possible thing imaginable, like a sulfuric cloud farted and a pus-filled gangrenous boil took a dump on it. And the moment you get away from the love, and I'm putting love in massive air quotes, of your patron, you cease to be numb to these extreme detriments. These are not gifts. You are cursed beyond cursed, and you will not be anything but a pus-filled bloated sewage bag. Now, to me, the worst thing that Games Workshop did to Warhammer around 3rd and 4th edition is lose all concept of scale. I have an army of 3rd and 4th edition Plague Marines, and they're actually quite amazing sculpts, very detailed models actually. They're all huge and bloated in the lore, even much larger than regular Astartes, but the Space Marine models for the Death Guard back then were literally smaller than the plastic Cadians at the time. Like, they're supposed to not only be Space Marines, but the largest, most swollen Space Marines, and they're like a head shorter than the Imperial Guard models. Scale was totally stupid back then. So what do? Field these guys and say Nurgle shrunk them in the warp to make them more infiltratey or something? Sorry for the tangent, but my point is that Games Workshop are not exactly consistent on how they treat Nurgle. The example with the 3rd edition Metal Plague Marines is just to illustrate that it is both in lore and on the tabletop. He's the fat guy stirring the boiling pot of corruption, smiling and laughing in almost all the imagery. But he's really the most sinister of the Chaos Gods. His whole image is just something his PR firm cooked up to help him convert more followers. Now, one thing I really think is telling about just how evil Nurgle really is how he's had Isha held captive in the Garden of Nurgle. Or does he actually? We haven't heard a thing from her in a while, unless I missed something, which is very possible. There's never-ending tide of Warhammer 40K constantly ebbing toward us all. Just like Nurgle's entropic ruin, ultimately we are all just sacks of rotting meat in the end, pushing up daisies and feeding the worms. The cycle of life complete. In the end, Nurgle wins. If the great game plays out for all eternity, as I think it does, sure, there's balance. But if it ever did come to an end and stop, if there ever was to be a single solid victor in the great game, it would be Nurgle. He has to do nothing but sit back and let the others rot away. Will the universe reset when it reaches its ultimate eventual stagnation? Will some other primordial force rear its head and reset the order of the galaxy? Of the warp? My thought is no. There are 8 gods of chaos, as one of my recent videos laid out. According to the PDF from the Horus Heresy section on the Warhammer community site, Battle for Om Numat, I believe it was called. So there are 7 other powers keeping ultimate stagnation and complete decay from consuming the galaxy. However, the Plague God may just be the most patient of all the ruinous powers. Is Nurgle the most evil god in your eyes? I can certainly see arguments to be made for any of the others, but to me, Nurgle takes the cake. Nothing like evil that enslaves you eternally, offering only infinite suffering if you refuse, and doing it all with a smile on its face and a belly full of laughs. At least I know Khorne hates me and wants to outright kill me. I know Slaanesh wants to torture and molest me to death and back, but she's not attached. And Tzeentch is too weird to even have a clue what he wants to do, but it seems like the worst thing he'll do is make you a bird, other than full chaos spawn, which sucks, but all the gods do it to those they reject, or heap too many gifts upon. I don't know how you feel, but I'd rather be a bird than a walking sack of pus and sewage.